Come what may, bring it on. I'm gonna love it.
Welcome to LDS Unmarried Life, a podcast for single members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who find themselves that way either because they're divorced, widowed, or not yet married. There is no affiliation with the church. All right. For those of you who have not gone to my website yet, I encourage you to go to AnnetteTalks.com and check out other podcasts there. It can also be found at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, you can find the book that Steve and I wrote and published on the website. It's called Dating After Divorce, an LDS Survival Guide. And if you haven't visited me, I'm also on Patreon. So you go to patreon.com/Annette Talks and you can help support the podcast. All right, so today we are going to be doing an episode on getting past betrayal and learning how to trust again. And we are very lucky and happy to have a professional here. And so I'm going to introduce her first, and then we're going to go around the group and introduce ourselves. So I have Rebecca Knudsen here. Rebecca is a licensed marriage and family therapist who holds the license. Are you still licensed in California? Mm-hmm. In both California and Colorado, and has been practicing for over 15 years. Is it more than 15 years now?
It's closer to 19 now.
Okay,
yeah.
Closer to 19 years. She completed her undergraduate work in psychology at BYU and her graduate work in marriage and family therapy at Loma Linda University. Sorry, I edited. Okay, she opened up her private practice in Los Angeles in 2003. But now, currently, Rebecca practices as the founder and clinical director of Thrive Relational Recovery, a psychotherapy clinic that provides highest quality services to individuals, adults and children, couples and families. Rebecca is passionate about integrating principles of psychology with gospel truths and helping her clients find healing through Christ. She has certifications in sex addiction, partners recovery, and is trained in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, otherwise known as EMDR, which I was just talking with Jocelyn about a while back. She is a devoted wife and mother of 3 and served an LDS mission in Brazil. And her licenses or accreditation is LMFT, which is licensed
marriage and family therapy. You can just leave that.
Okay. Anyway, and you can find her at www.thriverelationalrecovery.com. And did I leave anything out?
No, other than just the fact that our clinic really does specialize in sort of betrayal trauma and sex addiction and helping people navigate that. So.
Awesome. And that's why we asked Rebecca to join us today. And she was recommended to me by Jim Jacobs, who's a counselor that's been on this program regularly. And also heard her highly recommended by others. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Very excited to have you. All right. And now we're going to go around and introduce the rest of us. I'll start with me. Everyone knows me by now. I'm Annette Bybee. I'm 50. I've been divorced for 4 years in just a few days. I have 3 girls, ages 11, 10, and 8. And I love dark chocolate. Steve.
I'm Steve Smith. I'm on regularly. The phone number is 435-224-3850. Yeah, everybody's laughing, but I got my first message. Shout out to Utah for the kind words that you sent.
Awesome. All right.
It was very nice, and I do appreciate it. I'm 49. I've been divorced almost 6 years next month. Got 2 kids, a 20-year-old daughter that's on a mission, and a 16-year-old boy that lives with his mother in Utah.
Excellent. Jocelyn.
Jocelyn Armstrong. I don't give out my phone number on the internet. But I work in telecom. I'm a convert from when I was 16. And I have a 19-year-old daughter who will be going to BYU, Idaho come September. And I've been divorced since 2002.
All right, great. Nikki.
My name is Nikki Gamboni. I am in my late 30s. I have 4 kids, all boys. I work in the natural gas and oil industry, and I have been divorced for almost 6 years.
All right, all your 4 boys. We still need to get them together with my 3 girls sometime. See how that goes. It's really curious. All right, and we've got Melissa.
Melissa, I don't give out my phone number either. Last time I was here, I gave out Jenny's number instead. You can find that on the wall. I'm
My
50.
friend's phone number.
867-5309.
Yeah, gotcha.
Hi.
I'm 50. I've been divorced about 4.5 years. I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, 20, 18, and 11. My oldest lives with me. He works and goes to school. My daughter just graduated and is going to BYU, Idaho also. And I have and then my 11-year-old son is the 6th grader, and I love doing anything. I love life. Just recently bought a house, and so I'm doing lots of gardening and trying to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
I saw that Facebook post today. It looks like it's coming along.
It is. It's coming along, and I hate weeds and I hate getting dirt under my nails, but that's okay. I'll keep scrubbing, so
Yes.
I'm all good though.
Great. All right, Emily.
I'm Emily. I have 3 amazing, fun-loving children that keep me busy and laughing. And I just realized today that the snowboarding season starts in 4 months, and I'm way excited.
I'm glad some people like that. It's a good activity. All right, so the reason that we're doing this podcast today is that I was in a long-distance relationship not too long ago, where after it was over, I was texted by the guy's girlfriend from the time that we were together. They were dating. And basically found out that he had lied to me the entire time that we were long-distance dating. And so at first I was kind of relieved because I was ready to be over with the relationship, and I had even drafted an email that was ready to go, right?
You're like, no, I don't feel bad.
Yeah, and so I was like, I kind of laughed and I thought it was funny, and I was like, yes, now I don't have to worry about it. I can just say I found out about you and then, be good. But as time went by, I kept discovering things would come up. Like, what? So when he said that was a lie. And it it hurt. And I was kind of surprised to discover that even though I was done with him and I was glad to be done with him, that I felt betrayed. And so it started me thinking, well, for one thing, I thought I've got to make something good out of this. And so I decided to do this podcast. But also it made me realize that there are people out there who have been betrayed way worse than I have been, and for a much longer time and at a much deeper level. And so I started thinking on that, and I decided I'm going to do a podcast for people who have been betrayed, mostly in a sexual way, as far as they were either married to or in a relationship with someone who cheated on them, or who was active in pornography and lying about it and things like that. And because that was not my experience in my marriage, although after looking at some videos today about trauma and getting over that, I realized that there's a lot of similarity between getting over different types of trauma, because I feel like I have a little PTSD from my marriage. There was emotional abuse. And I'm thinking there's some commonality. And so for those that are listening, I'm hoping that this will help you to overcome betrayal, whether it was sexual betrayal or in some other way. Because I feel like when we're betrayed, we're betrayed. However, I chose this group that I chose today because I know them all personally, and I've heard their stories, and I know that they all went through some sort of sexual betrayal in their past relationships. And so without going into details about those, I know that they can all relate to the feelings, to what happened, and to trying to overcome it and to trying to move on. And so I wanted them all here so that I could kind of guide the discussion while they have it, since I don't have as much experience in that area. And knock on wood, hopefully never will. I was thinking how Heavenly Father moves in mysterious ways, and I'm like, please don't let this be, because someday I'm going to have to deal with it in the future. I mean, I really hope not. I'm hoping that it's just to help everyone here and out in the audience. But for whatever reason, we're here today to deal with this. So my goal is to help people to learn to trust themselves and to be able to move forward into new relationships, or even just healing if they're not ready for another relationship yet. So let's get started. Does anyone have anything that they want to raise? Or Rebecca, do you have anything that you want to say at the outset?
Yeah, gosh, I was sitting here thinking that I have so much I'd like to say, and I don't know that there'll be enough time, but I think the biggest thing to start with is that it's really important to know that even if you are no longer in a betrayed relationship, or even if you've stayed in the marriage and the person has turned it around and is not betraying you anymore, the betrayal stays with you. You actually can have symptoms of PTSD, and they've proven that. And so it's interesting when you look at the 5 criteria for PTSD. The first criteria is that there's some sort of threat to life. Now, a lot of people will say, well, betrayal trauma isn't a threat to life, but when you look at, okay, the fact that you could get STDs, that could threaten your life. Also, when you think about attachment, our first attachment relationship was as a baby with our parents. And so we were completely vulnerable. We completely trusted them. And so if they didn't follow through, that our life depended on it. And so with attachment, they show that the only relationship that mirrors that mother-child relationship is an intimate, committed partnership. Mm-hmm. And so when that person is no longer available to you, it feels like a threat to life. It feels like you can't survive. And so that's why that criteria A works. But then criteria B is the constant reliving, and people that have been through betrayal, and you even said this, Annette, you continue to play it over in your head over and over again. You get triggers. You might see something or hear something or smell something that reminds you, and it throws you back to that place. You might have dreams, nightmares. And so the reliving thing that happens with veterans of war happens with betrayal. And then the third criteria is avoidance, which is you want to avoid people. You actually avoid yourself. You might want to numb out all the time. You don't want to go places that remind you of things. So that is huge with betrayal. And then criteria D is it changes your beliefs about yourself. So you have a lot of negative cognitions and a lot of negative moods. So depression and anxiety is huge with betrayal. And there usually ends up being some sort of core negative belief that is not true that you carry with you after betrayal. Things like, I wasn't enough, I can't trust myself, I can't trust other people, and so that stays with you. And then criteria E is emotional arousal and reactivity, so that's like your sleep might be thrown off, your eating, you might have that hypervigilance everywhere you go, anxiety, just your body is in a constant state of just tension and awareness of I can't let myself get hurt like this again. And I have a client that just started with me recently who has a horrible trauma history. She actually saw her father kill her mother. So you can't think of anything worse than that, right? But the betrayal that she's gone through in her marriage, she says, blows that trauma out of the water. How it feels for her. So I just want the listeners and everyone here to know that it's a big deal. And if you're thinking, I just need to forgive and move on and get over it, it may not be that easy. And the best treatment for PTSD is some sort of trauma therapy, EMDR therapy. And I could say a lot more about that, but that's just what I wanted to put out there for now.
So I have 2 questions that come up immediately with that. Number 1, is it common for someone that suffered some sort of trauma in childhood to then sort of subconsciously seek out a marriage or relationship that will bring them more trauma?
I hate that explanation because I think it does happen.
Like a pattern.
Yeah, it does happen, but not always. And I know a lot of people that had great childhoods, no trauma, and ended up in a relationship with betrayal. But it does complicate the healing process if you have childhood trauma, because it's like now you've got this big trauma in the current, you've got the past trauma, and they're all, it's like spaghetti, they're all mingled together. So it does complicate things.
Okay, so that, and then I have 2 questions that I have to get them both out. I just don't know which order to do. All right, so the EMDR, tell me what that is.
So it's hard to be concise with that, but it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so it's a way you stimulate eye movement back and forth. And something about that will stimulate both sides of the brain at the same time.
As you're talking about the thing that is...
Yeah, you start out with the memory that is traumatic, the one that you keep replaying, and then you process that memory with eye movements. And And what it does is when we have something traumatic, our brain can't make sense of it. So it stays in short-term memory. And short-term memory is super raw. It's like you're living it right then. Whereas normal things will just kind of process through, go into long-term memory, and it happened, but we don't feel it in its raw form. So with these traumatic memories, it stays in short-term memory, and that's why we're triggered all the time. That's why when there's things that remind us, it's like we're living it all over again. And so the EMDR helps the brain do the work to put that into long-term memory so you feel at peace. And also the goal of the EMDR is to change the negative belief associated with that memory. So you could start off with, when this happened, I believed I wasn't good enough, and then you might end with something like, that was about my partner, not about me, and I am good enough, and I know I'm loved by the Lord, or whatever it might be, that the brain just resolves it. It's a fascinating process. It's really powerful.
That is really interesting. Because when Jocelyn brought it up, and I read it a little bit about it, and I thought, that sounds pretty powerful. So do you see a lot of success with that?
Oh yeah, it's my favorite technique by far.
I have 2 friends
so powerful.
who are doing it right now, and it's almost like they told me, they're like, it's strange, like you can feel things changing, like as it's happening. And it kind of makes me think, too, that maybe we really are more neurotic than our predecessors, because I was thinking, well, how did women get over this in the past? We've become an increasingly not what's the word I'm looking for, artisanal society. Like, women used to sit around and quilt and use both their hands and knit and crochet and talk about what was bothering them with the other women in the group. And I think that's actually kind of something that we've lost, is our ability to process this stuff as we've become an increasingly technological society.
Interesting.
I also think that I think we have so many more techniques for numbing these days.
Yes.
And what EMDR does is it forces you to stay with the memory and feel it, and it helps you process through it more quickly. But we don't typically do that. There's so many ways that we can numb out and cut out and not feel it, and so we don't give that memory a chance to sort of process through. But I also think back in the day, people were very kind of emotionally cut off in a lot of ways. They stayed busy, they worked on the farm, they didn't think about it. So that I think we're more into.
They didn't have time to ruminate on it.
Yeah, it was about survival back then. You think about that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They were on those bottom levels. They were just trying to survive, and we're trying to achieve self-actualization.
Right.
And so
I just remember when my ex moved out, and most people are stress eaters. I'm a stress starver.
Yeah.
Oh, this is Melissa, by the way. And so all of a sudden, I'm not eating. I'm not sleeping. I'm dropping a ton of weight. And I found that I usually go for a walk, and I found that walking and swearing really puts a punch behind that walking.
Did you say swearing?
Swearing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, walking and swearing.
And walking has similar effects to EMDR because it's that bilateral motion.
Yeah, and just
that's why it's so good for you.
For whatever, my rhythm just kind of was 4-letter words, and so I just kept walking. And it was really funny. So here I'm dropping weight, and people, my friends at church, my friends at work, my neighbors were all like, "Oh, you look fantastic. What are you doing? You look like you're glowing, and you're so happy, and you're so slim." And I'm like, my life is falling apart. And but actually, when I look back at it now, though, I realize that his leaving was a huge weight. Off of me, and I finally. So
you dropped like 200 pounds, is what you're saying?
No, I dropped. And that's what I would tell people. They're like, "You look fantastic. How much did you weigh?" I'm like, "Well, I've lost about 340, but I can only say it's only 40 of me. The other 300 is okay. But I think, and so, but look, and that it was at the moment. It was just I was just stressed, and I couldn't. I just was just dealing with it, and I looked, I was slim, I was emaciated and not very healthy, but I look back at it now, though, and I just realized that it was, I was actually relieved. I was miserable longer than I thought I was, and, he just, he made his move how he made his move, and, it was unfortunate how it came about, but, in reality, even though I thought it was all crushed and broken, and it was actually a relief. It was a huge relief. And so I, maybe the weight wasn't, but the glow that I hadn't had everybody was just like, "You are glowing. What is going on in your life that is making you glow?" I'm like, okay,
wait. We've got 2 hands going up. It's so polite here. Emily?
Thank you. So with those activities of walking, what other things help a person to not just kind of come down, oh no, I've got some feelings, let me take off again. How do they sit in those feelings? How do they process that instead of numbing or distracting or avoiding?
Yeah, there's so many good techniques for that. I would say meditation is huge. And
what does that look like when you say meditation?
well, there's, you could find on your phone, there's lots of meditation apps. It's a process of mostly just breathing and staying with whatever you're feeling and trying to clear your brain of all the distractions and just being in your body. Yoga is huge. In fact, we do yoga at our clinic for betrayal trauma just because it's such a huge component of the healing process. Journaling, but also, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I just think there's so much isolation when there's betrayal because there's shame around it. You got to keep people's secrets. You can't talk about it, and that inhibits the healing process as well because we need to have people that we can talk to and we need to process verbally.
And in our church, people don't really want to talk about it. So
not at all. I know, and especially if there's addiction or
So who are those safe people that a person would be able to talk to help that process?
I mean, I think you can find that you could try and find that on your own. I mean, a bishop, but you have to be careful what the bishops will say. Yeah, but I mean, I think if you can find a group, like we run groups also of women that are going through the same experience, there's a lot of power in that because if you could find somebody on your own that's going through it that also has tools that isn't going to get stuck in like victim mode and anger and so forth, you want to find women that are able to say, yes, I'm sorry, I keep using women. I'm sorry, men as well. You want to find people that
are moving past it.
Are moving forward that aren't saying I'm a victim but are saying I can heal.
It can also be a good healthy distraction.
Yeah.
That you can come up and just say, hey, I'm stuck in the house, I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
And go get ice cream, go get something just to get out of the
And people that haven't been through betrayal have a really hard time understanding really what that's like.
I also feel like there's a point. Okay, so I keep forgetting what I'm saying with the hand raising thing. I'm not ever going to.
Okay, Jocelyn. Well, we don't have 8 people today, so.
I know. I'm so sorry. By the time we get to that point, I forget what I was going to say.
Last
I'm
time we had
listening to what
8
everybody else
people,
is saying, and
so
I
we kept having to raise hands. So
the good news is I'm not one of those people who's only thinking about what they're saying. That's also the bad news. So, I do think that there are people because I went and looked for some support groups when I went through what I did, and it turned out that a lot of women, it becomes a defining characteristic in their lives, like that this is who they were and they were treated poorly, and it's like a wall they throw up, and they, and anytime you interact with them, if there's an unhealthy interaction, they can't say, wow, I reacted badly to that and I recognize that it was because this happened, but that wasn't fair to you, so moving forward, I will try something new. They're just like, well, this is what happened to me, and so this is the way I am, and you just need to deal with it. And I was like, I don't want to. And it's not fair, especially if we do want to have another relationship moving forward. It's not fair to do that to other people.
Absolutely.
I also don't think it's fair or realistic to say that you're not going to carry it with you, but you can at least identify it when it happens and say, I need to own this. I'm sorry. This is why it happened. Moving forward, I will make sure, or let's work on this together. But you can't just be like, nope, this is the way it is.
Yeah, you've got to find the right type of group for sure. And, one more thing, Emily, I think mindfulness, if you can read books on mindfulness or practice mindfulness, that's a great way to stay with your feelings. And just to address Steve, I will say, if we're talking about men that are betrayed, there's less resources out there for that because I think men are even more private about betrayal because it just feels there's more shame attached to it for some reason.
Well, there is in our church.
Yeah.
Because, and what I've felt and what I've even been told is it was my fault. It doesn't matter what she chose to do. It was my fault because I was a priesthood holder in the family. I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So there is a lot more shame and guilt.
Absolutely.
To me, it doesn't matter the decisions.
And I find that men have a harder time moving through betrayal. There's a lot more anger and a lot more kind of obsessing about it. And so we do need more resources for men, but we'll get there. And a lot of the stuff still applies.
And you see both men and women and kids.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention this earlier, but your center is in Centennial, right? Okay, so those that are listening, she's not in Utah, sorry. Do you have, if I have a listener that reaches out that wants a referral in Utah, do you know of any programs up there?
Yeah, I would highly recommend ADDO Recovery. ADDO, ADDO Recovery. They're very similar to us. We've worked closely with them.
Okay.
They do great work.
And also, as long as we're on that topic, one of the resources that you sent to me ahead of time was bloomforwomen.com. And I don't think it really is just for women, because I watched some of the videos today. They have these courses, and you can sign up for free. And I signed up for free, and I've been working through some of the courses, and they're awesome.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend that for anyone that if you can't get to counseling for some reason, or maybe you're just far away, or go to Bloom, BLOOM for women. Sorry, Steve. .com.
It's not.
a bad
sorry,
name.
Steve. It's Bloom for Women.
It's not Bloom for Women. Sorry, Steve. It's just bloomforwomen.com. But one of the things that I saw on there was that there was a gentleman, and I looked on this trauma course, and he did this thing called a trauma tree, and it reminded me of what you were talking about and what Emily was talking about, how we only deal with the behaviors that come out of it. And he was saying that's like the leaves or the branches. The behaviors like drugs or alcohol or smoking or even social media. And I'm like, ooh, that's a little close to the bone there, right? But that's the behaviors that come out of it. And then the trunk is like the
core belief.
The what?
Core belief.
Well, he said it was like the
I haven't seen the video.
okay, you haven't. The disorder, maybe like depression or anxiety, and then the roots are the trauma. And he says until you deal with the roots, you're never going to take care of the leaves. And so I was thinking about that a lot, because all those leaves, if you're seeing those behaviors happening, the turning to a substance, eating, gambling, all those things that we do to numb or to distract, just ending those is not going to work, because you might stop them for a while, but the roots are still there. And he says that, and then he even had a watering can, and he said the watering can that grows the tree is like shaming, reliving things from the past, people blaming, all these things that make it worse. And so I thought it was really interesting. So if you guys get a chance to go to bloomforwomen.com and find the trauma, I think it was called Overcoming Trauma or something, but it was like a 15-minute maybe, but he does the trauma tree, and it was really interesting. But I was thinking about that and how it is similar. The stuff that I went through in my marriage, even though it wasn't sexual betrayal, caused a lot of the similar behaviors that I see in the tree, and the feelings, the disorder, because I've suffered depression and anxiety, and the counselor that I go to says they're like two sides of the same coin. And so she's given me some real tools, and that which gives me a segue into the other thing that I always talk about on my episodes when it applies. But I do a meditative walk every day, and it's about 45 minutes, and I just go out into nature. And I actually ran into a member of my ward one day, and we both stopped and we said, I've come to some of my greatest realizations on my nature walks. And he said, it's because you're out in nature, and it's creation, and it's creation from the Creator, right? And so it's a perfect place for you to go out and get away from distractions and to get into your body, like Rebecca said. And they talk about this a lot on the bloomforwomen.com, and getting into your body and getting into the moment. And so I walk with no headphones and nothing, and I just start an open dialogue with Heavenly Father, and I do this meditative walk where I pray, and without fail, it centers me, and it gives me patience, and it just brings me down a little bit as far as my emotions, if they're all jangly. It brings them down, and it gives me peace, and inspiration comes in. And so I cannot recommend that enough. This is meditation in some form or another. And that's why I was really fascinated to hear what you said about walking, being a bilateral thing, and which so totally makes sense, because I tried just sitting down, meditating thing. Oh, it's really hard to do. Some people are really good with it, but for me it was hard. And walking has always been the thing.
And by the way, that's why it works. It is hard, and so the more you do it, it changes your brain, But I'm the same way. So.
And see, I feel it's.
This is Jocelyn.
Yes, Jocelyn. Lately, at least for me, a lot of times my biggest epiphany and aha moments come when I'm cleaning. I'll be standing there doing the dishes, and it is something where you're kind of. Your body's busy, but you're allowing your brain to wander, right? So your brain can go someplace else, and I'll be washing the dishes, or I'll be mopping the floor, or I'll be folding laundry, or doing all of the things that I do on the weekends because I can't do them during the week, and I'll have these big epiphanies as far as parenting, or how to handle my daughter, or why things are the way they are right now, or and it's that pondering. You have to set aside time to ponder whatever that.
Right, let your brain just not work on something for a while, taking a break. isn't that funny how sometimes you'll like try really hard to think of like a name or something and you can't remember it, but as soon as you just move on to something else, oh, it pops in.
It comes.
Or you sit up at 2:00 in the morning going, oh, that's it. It's like because your body is at rest.
Right, and the same thing I've found with taking a hot bath or a hot shower. Have you guys had those? Like, stuff comes to me when I'm in a hot bath, and I think it's because my body's totally relaxed, and I'm not doing anything else, and so it's,
I think what you guys are saying, the body knows how to heal if you stay with it. You know, the body has its own healing process. It's just when we cut out all the time or distract ourselves all the time. Yeah.
Yes, Nikki.
And I think that's the key right there, staying with it.
Yeah.
Because the hardest thing for me was coming to the realization, getting past the denial of, no, that didn't happen to me. Because that means that I was manipulated, or, you know, just getting past coming to the point of acceptance and staying put in allowing yourself to go through the pain. For me, that was the biggest thing, was allowing myself to sit in the pain and having grace and compassion for myself that I so easily gave away to other people. But when it came to me, I was like, okay, girl, you've been crying for, you know, such and such days, pick yourself up off the ground, move past it.
Yes.
And then when you realize, okay, this isn't working, you know, this pep talk isn't working, you're going to have to sit in this and go through it so you can heal and be the best version of you, so you can find a healthy relationship.
And that's what they say, you can't heal it unless you feel it, and that you're
and
just,
it's hard.
You're describing mindfulness right now. Mindfulness is
really hard.
Recognizing the feeling, allowing instead of resisting, just okay, I'm going to just let that feeling come, and then instead of trying to fix it, move in with self-compassion or move to the Savior with compassion, you know, and that is what actually heals. It's great.
Well, I was at my doctor's office, and you know, I'm right in the middle of kind of dealing with all of this, and we had just separated, and the nurse that was there, you know, I'm a bucket of tears, and she said, you know, and this is when the kids were starting to split. We were going to start splitting their time going back and forth, and I'm crying, and she said, you know, she goes, I went through the same thing. She goes, I had my kids for several years, and I never had to share custody, and then all of a sudden their father decided to come back into their lives, and I'm now, she goes, it was very hard. She goes, but let me just give you a piece of advice. She says, what you want to do is your weeks off is you want to take good care of yourself so you're fresh to receive your children home. Yeah. And that was like, boom, in the face. Nice big smack in the face for Melissa there. And I completely embraced that. And so here I was rattling around in this big house by myself, going absolutely insane. And so it's like, well, what can I do with my time? So I just got a part-time job. Didn't need it, but I just started working a 3-hour job in the evenings. And then my bishop recommended to start working in a temple. And he's just like, volunteer, do something, go flowers, I don't care. And I volunteer, and so I'm like, so I took 1 week and I started volunteering in the temple, in the laundry. Yeah. And that's where I know you from. The repetitive folding and the repetitive, you know, helps you. It's you can't swear and fold.
No, you can't swear and
fold.
Not at the temple.
But you know, you can. But you know, that was an amazing help for me, and just trying to just distract myself throughout the week, keep myself busy so that I'm not sitting there. I have a tendency, and I always joke about it, that you know, I'll chew on it for a while. When it gets stale, then I'll stick it in my hair, and then I'll get mad and complain that it's in my hair, but I'll pull it out and I'll chew on it some more, and then when I'm tired of chewing on it, then I'll stick it behind my ear, and then I get mad that it's behind my ear, and I'll chew it on it some more. I kind of do all, you know,
That's
and just kind of constantly, you know, and I don't stick it in my hair anymore. But, you know, I think, but for me, it kept me from chewing on it and chewing on it and chewing on it and chewing on it. And then, you know, and so then I signed up for a second shift. And even when they changed the rules that you can now be divorced and not have to wait the 5 years and be an ordinance worker, that was my whole goal, is eventually I'm going to be an ordinance worker. I want to be an ordinance worker. I haven't signed up yet because I love the laundry so much and it's so therapeutic for me that I just don't. And it has improved that when, my kids go to their dad's house, but they come home to mom.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. Yeah. Perfect. I'll keep it. And even if I've had a really bad week or a crappy week, I always just try to peel it off so that I'm there for my kids for the week that I've got them. And I've been a better mom in the 4 years. It's just, there's peace and there's much more joy.
I love
that I never had. I didn't have happiness was kind of hard, but once we kind of dialed into the joy, it kind of was a whole new happy that I can't describe.
I think it's hard too because there's like a line that you have to walk between forgiving yourself and owning what happened, and between being able to process it but not getting stuck in it. I mean, it's and I guess it's that way. I think with everything, the older I get, I think the more there's like, wow, everything's a balancing act. There is no black and white ever. I mean, there might be a black and white for the decision for you in that moment, but when you actually step back and take a big look at it, like, because you don't want to ruminate, but at the same time you don't want to avoid because it has to come out. I've told my daughter before, I was like, it's like you can let it grow into a boil, or you can just kind of like go in your room and cry it out and like, but either way, it has to come out. There's no getting away from it. Yeah. And, getting to that point. And I also think too, that a lot of times as we're getting over it, we mistake hard for strong. And I see that with a lot of women, like where they're just like, nobody's going to take care. I was like, well, maybe they will, but you're strong enough to get over that. And you know that it's not you, it's them. So being able to be, I think, Annette and I had this discussion before, that being vulnerable is actually being very strong.
Absolutely. Well, and I think even like the rumination and the numbing, those are kind of those branches of the tree that you were talking about. So, because when you're ruminating, you're in your head, you're not really feeling the feeling in your body. So, I think it does require like kind of saying, okay, what's happening in my body? Where am I feeling that? Let that pass through your body. And I love what you said about self-care, because that's a huge part of the healing process, instead of being focused on the person that hurt me and how could they and trying to control it and whatever else, or
we're just sitting around hating them.
Yeah.
Just sitting in a stew of hate. It's like,
and anger's a part of the grief process, but you don't want to stay stuck in it. Yeah, but when you say, okay, self-care and self-compassion, that facilitates healing.
Sorry, I think Nikki first and then Jocelyn.
So I had a question. So once you've moved past healing, and you feel like you're ready to move on again, what are some tools that you would suggest as far as letting go of the past and trusting yourself enough to seriously try again, to give this new person a fresh, wipe the slate clean and completely start over without your walls way up to the ceiling?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked,
because I think there's different tools like journaling and walking and meditating. For me, those have helped me to heal, but how do you, what
Trust
tools,
again.
I think that's an important question, because if you're not ready and you go out there not ready, you're just going to hurt somebody else.
Absolutely.
Well, and there's boundaries, and then there's like to the ceiling boundaries.
Well,
sometimes you don't even realize you're not.
And there's a difference between a wall and a boundary. A wall is I'm not letting anybody in. A boundary is more like a fence, and you could talk to somebody over a fence, but you're very clear about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. So I would say, first of all, you have to recognize trusting again is a choice. It's a very brave choice. And you have to look at, okay, yes, I could get hurt again. It's very real that you can get hurt again, but I've never known anybody happy that has walls. It's just no way to live a life. So you're safe, but you're not going to find joy again with that wall. So you have to have that desire, first of all, that I want to let this wall down. I want to let people in. But then going into, I think if you educate yourself on sex addiction, if you educate yourself on infidelity and you know the signs to look for, you can go into the next relationship being open about discussing those things and then trusting your gut. And so that reminds me,
that's a little bit
the
different
hard
for
part.
women than it is for men.
Yes.
How do I know when a woman's ready and past some of those things
Sure.
to date rather than they're looking at?
How do
Yes,
you know
yeah.
that you're ready? This is something that I've seen over and over again with men, is they only want women who are emotionally unavailable.
Well, that's not the type of...
Hi, Dad.
you want.
My dad's been married 5 times.
Yeah.
And he went through a lot of therapy before he came to the realization that there was a specific relationship in his life that he was duplicating over and over and over
Sure.
again,
Yeah.
trying to get closure and resolution on it, and he just couldn't, because there would never be resolution on it, because that kind of personality, that wasn't. And he was one of the first people I know who did like EMDR. He went through that to kind of get himself past that. And the woman he's married to now, they seem very happy together. I mean, we're all a little bit cynical in my family, because it's like 4 stepmoms is a lot.
Set him to your watch.
I don't necessarily believe that men want women who are emotionally unavailable. I tell Annette all the time, I can only go out with the women that will say yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of the emotional unavailable women say yes.
Don't ghost them, it helps.
So getting back to
The question.
how can we move forward? Because I think a lot of it is being able to trust yourself, not trusting the other person.
Well, and I would say the 2 of the most common negative beliefs that come from betrayal that you end up with are either I can't trust myself, or how could I have been so stupid, And so if you go and if you're still, that negative belief will stick with you unless you really do the work to overcome that. And so, I mean, when you have somebody looking you in the eye and lying to you, you no longer have that sense of I can trust people. I can tell if somebody's trustworthy. My gut feels it, and so you have to do that work to say, I can trust myself, and to get good at listening to your gut again, and trusting your gut and setting boundaries, because you could end up in a relationship with somebody who has these tendencies again. But if you go into it saying, I know what I'm going to do if this happens, I know what boundaries I'm going to set as soon as I start
recognize them immediately.
Yes, yeah,
I think that was part of owning it, is even though what happened was absolutely not your fault, recognizing that there was a point where you should have recognized it.
Yeah, and
that
so
part
often
would have been
people are like,
why-
I knew, but I just didn't trust it because he kept
Right.
telling me it was fine, or she kept telling me it was okay, and
Something that my therapist told me or said is, you're going to go into a relationship with baggage, but you don't need a whole cartload. She goes, if you can get your baggage and garbage and all that down into a very cute little carry-on,
yeah.
Louis Vuitton, Coach, doesn't matter. That it's small enough with just the most important things that still make you vulnerable, still that are issues with you, but yet you've trimmed it down to the core most important things that still hit you hard in the heart or hit you hard in the mind. That if you compare, because usually a lot of times we pile a lot. It's that Shrek onion thing, and if you can kind of get down to the bottom of it and have that and be aware of it, but have it packed neatly in a smaller carry-on and carry that with you, and just say, I don't have all this anymore. I just have the small one, and I'll share that with you one day. That really it's just sifting through the baggage and just kind of getting it condensed down into one, where you're still acknowledging who you are, what you have done, and who you want to be, and what you do, but it's just the basics, and it's the real truth, and it's nothing more than that.
I think recognizing what your baggage is, or at least part of unpacking it. So I've joked that my entire life is an exercise in cognitive therapy, because it's there's the things that scare you, or the things that have happened, and especially for me, I recognize patterns and everything. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is just so as far as being mindful, at least for me, a lot of what that means is when I feel something, before I act, before I run my mouth, before I blow up on somebody, and this has actually been kind of hard on some of the men that I date, I'll be like, what you just said made me really angry, but I'm not sure why. And I don't want to talk to you about it until I figure it out. So I'm going to have to step away. I'll call you maybe in half an hour, maybe in 45 minutes, but let me think about this because I'm not sure why. And they're like, no, we want to talk about it. I was like, you're not going to like what I'm going to have to say if you keep pushing. Just please let me step away. And then I can stop and think about it and say, what happened to me in the past? Why am I feeling this? Because it's like a landmine. You don't know it's there until you step on it, or they step on it. And then you have to stop and really be mindful, and you can feel it, like you can acknowledge that you're feeling it. You can't say, well, I shouldn't be feeling that. You just say, okay, I feel this, but it's not really valid for this situation, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed as I normally would have. And then you have a whole nother pattern that's been set, and eventually you can get past it so that you're not just like a nerve ending reacting to a specific stimulus.
Yeah.
Do you crochet and knit?
I do.
Okay, yeah. I
Actually,
have a
when I'm
tendency for
really
patterns
angry, I'm like,
when I
Don't get angry.
crochet and swear.
So yeah, that makes me think about the fact that a lot of times when you're not in a relationship and you don't really know how good your healing is, how much you've done, until you're in a relationship, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, because like I'm in a new relationship right now too, and so stuff's starting to pop up that I had no idea. I mean, I thought I took care of all that, right? But now it's coming up, and so I want to do my best to make sure I'm giving this a full-on chance and not running away like I have in the past, or it's been easy because guys will run. So if I'm in a relationship, or if anybody's in a relationship and they're starting to feel things come up that are being triggered by just being in a relationship, what's the best way to handle that?
I mean, I think being aware, self-aware is the most important thing, and it will happen because, again, with an intimate partnership, we let that person into a deeper level than anybody else. So all that stuff we're holding in that inner level is going to come out. And so I think being mindful of it yourself, doing the hard work of like, why am I feeling that? What is that feeling telling me?
Taking it really slow so that it's not like just this tidal wave of like.
But I also think, you can practice vulnerability as you're starting to get closer to a person and really be communicative about, okay, I just got triggered, and you don't put it on them, like, don't do that thing because you're triggering me, but this is an opportunity for me to be aware that that thing hasn't healed yet, and I've got to do the work to heal it. I mean, I always recommend therapy as an avenue to do that, but there's other avenues that we talked about earlier, just the mindfulness, and just know that every feeling is guiding you in some way. It's telling you either something's unresolved, or anger tells us we need to set boundaries. Fear tells us we need to protect ourselves. What are the other emotions? Disgust tells us that thing is bad for us and not healthy. So if we get good at being in our feelings, then we get good at trusting our gut, and our feelings will tell us this person doesn't feel trustworthy, that there's something off. And women talk about that when they hear about a betrayal, like 20 years, or for 20 years, they've been feeling like something was off. I don't know. I just felt like something was off. And then finally they figure out what it was. So getting good at listening to your feelings and trusting your gut.
Yeah, it's funny because when I look back on the relationship, the long distance relationship where I was being lied to, I thought things were difficult for a different reason. Like I knew I was disturbed. Something was not right. There was a disturbance in the forest, right? Something was not right. I just didn't know what it was because I had never been in a relationship like that where I had been lied to before. So I didn't recognize it. And now when I look back on it, I'm like, oh yeah, red flag there, red flag there, red flag there. And now I know I can trust my gut because it was trying to tell me just that I am not conversant with that discussion with my gut. Now I am. And so I can kind of hopefully in the future go, okay, something is not sounding right here. Also, I want to point out that one good thing about being single and dealing with this is that we can be in relationships and get experience and practice with this without being in a committed marriage where the relationship lives or dies.
It's ride or die.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is a really good chance to take the healing that we've done and give it a test drive, right? To go how, and because we know, I mean, if your relationship doesn't work out, it's not great, but it's not the worst thing in the world. There's no divorce coming along. You're not gonna have to split the kids, split the money, whatever. You're just moving on to another relationship. And I know it's hard in Colorado. We don't have that many people to date, but I also have the ultimate faith that Heavenly Father is putting things in our path for our experience. I know that He does that for a reason, and that if He's giving us a relationship just for the experience, that we can take that experience and that He will then later give us another relationship that will be for more than experience. And so, I mean, to me, part of relationships is Heavenly Father is testing me big time in faith and patience. He wants me to have patience with the process, patience with myself, patience with the guy I'm dating, and faith that if I'm doing the right thing, it will all work out for me in the end, whether it's this relationship or one down the line. So, I mean, that's one good thing about being single and doing this. is that this is not live or die.
You know,
Yes.
a tool that I was encouraged to use was about always finding a positive off of a negative. And even if you have to scrape it down to a crumb,
Some of
you
your
find
silver
it.
linings are really twisty
They're really
and twisted.
awful.
Yeah, they're like little
And
corkscrews.
But they're in there somewhere, right?
And I think for me, I had been patting myself on the back, thinking that, oh, if I forget that, if I can shave off a second of every day, not thinking about my ex and this friend, both of them together, I was because I was betrayed by both, and it was very difficult, and so I decided to tackle her first, and it really was a huge trigger when she spoke in church one Sunday, and I was literally like hand over my ears, make it stop, it was just awful. I just couldn't even. And I realized that if I tried to shave off a second of every day, trying to not think about them, how many seconds of how many years is this going to take me? And I realized that I just needed to do a purge, and I had no idea how to do it. So one of the things that was recommended to me is you find a positive. And when you find that positive about a person, you literally repeat it over and over and over and over and over again, and you put that person metaphorically in your pocket, and you walk around with them in your pocket for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And every time that person pops up in your head or the situation, you shout the positive back at the negative, and you get on a computer and you open up a Word document and you type it 1,000,000 times, or you instead of walk and swear it, you walk and say it. You the positive, you write it, you scream it, you go outside and yell it, you scream it in a pillow. And so that's what I did is with this woman, I found two positives.
When
And
you say positives, do you mean
something about her?
That's
something
actually
a
really
positive that came out of it, and that was hard.
Something positive that
took
came
a lot
out of it
strength.
because of what she did, or two
Mine-
things that,
okay,
she's a really good listener. Like,
No, if sometimes mine were, she actually did me a favor.
yeah,
And
I feel
at least the one positive is that she at least tried to apologize. It was half-hearted. It was very backhanded, and yet she at least attempted to try to apologize when he never has. And so I shouted those two things back every single, and it took me 2 weeks. I went to the temple, and I'm like, okay, Heavenly Father, I'm going to do this. I really don't want her in my pocket, but I'm going to do this. And I made it a goal that because I work at the temple every other week, so that the next time at my next shift, 2 weeks later, that I could hopefully be able to not get it all out, but take a huge scoop out. Mm-hmm. And so literally I did that. Every time, I don't care, I grabbed a notebook, I grabbed something, I screamed it back every time I thought of him and her, him, it, that, whatever. And it helped. It really helped. And it changed. It just changed my attitude toward all of it. And then I was able to literally sit down 2 weeks and just take a huge blob of it out of my brain and my heart and just hand it over to Heavenly Father and do it and walk away.
I think that you took it to Heavenly Father is a big deal too, because
Yeah,
He
that's a
will
huge piece.
always magnify your efforts when you do it that way. Like,
yeah, and what I've had to do though, but my problem with handing things over to Heavenly Father is I'm like, okay, Heavenly Father, I'm gonna hand you this, and then I'm like, so how you doing with that? Now,
That's the trust and faith
This
piece.
is what, and I'm like, okay, but you're not taking care of it the way I would take care of it, and you're not working on it fast enough. And what
So
I
you
used to
didn't
do is
really
like,
hand it
I'll
over to
babysit.
him then?
Well, that's what I used to do, and I realized when I started I found myself kind of wanting to check in.
it's a partnership.
I was like, and it was when my bishop was just like, walk away.
Yes.
Walk away, walk away, walk away. And I had to just finally walk away, and I don't check in. I don't do anything. He handled it. He took good care of it. And then, but with that situation, I was able to do that with a horrible boss down the road a number of months later. And actually, I've been able to do that with my ex now. But instead of kind of walking around with all the shouting positives and negatives. The biggest positive for me is I moved out of our marital home and I bought a new house.
That's huge.
And I was able to finally shed all of that and be able to let a lot of that go. But also when I was painting walls and cleaning out boxes and looking at all of the kind of residual marriage stuff, I was kind of like, gone, shout that out, shout that, and did a purge, even though I couldn't do it before. And so I've lost weight because I've broken my foot, but for the most part, I've also been able to just, lighten my whole load, because even though I've moved to a smaller house, I have a lot more. But it's just been, that purge has been helpful. But that was a really great tool to help me, and I've been able to use it in other situations, kids, coworkers, and being able to scream positives back at negatives, no matter how much you hate saying their name or whatever. It was good for me.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Yeah. I'm going to stop you there because we are over time. But I just want to say, I think all of you are so brave and awesome for being where you are right now, considering what you've all been through. I can only understand just a little bit. And I really appreciate you all being willing to come. First of all, be my friend, share your stories with me, and be willing to come on here and share what you've been through a little bit, and help our audience learn a little bit. I've learned a lot. And before we wrap up, Rebecca, do you have any parting advice or comments or anything that you want to say?
I think there is just one little story that I love. When people go through betrayal, they often feel broken. And some people say it's more than broken. It's, because there is the story of, okay, you're like the broken vessel and the Lord can put you back together, and that becomes more beautiful. But I would say with betrayal, it's almost like you're broken to powder, and how do you put powder back together? But then that takes me to the scriptures, and you think about how Christ took dust, and, with his saliva, he was able to make clay and heal. And then you think about clay in the potter's hands, the Savior being the potter. And so what I've seen in my experience, people that have been through betrayal that have really done the work, is that they end up so much more beautiful than they were when they started.
I agree.
And so much more wholehearted. And so I hope that whoever's listening, and for all of you here, can take what feels like something shameful and something ugly and something that makes them feel worse about themselves, to something that, as they turn it over to the Lord, not just turn it over to the Lord, but like work with the Lord, that they will become more beautiful in the end. And so
thank you. Amen, right?
Yeah, I think that the first time we trust, it's because that's just our natural state. And the second time, it's a choice. And when it's a choice, well, it's what Heavenly Father says, everything is, at that point, it is a noteworthy and admirable trait instead of a naive trait.
And it makes everyone that's been through it empathetic and able to help others who are also going through it.
Absolutely.
And I think, to me, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why we have trials in life, is so that we can help other people go through it. So again, thank you all for coming. I will be sharing the website, Rebecca's website, thriverelationalrecovery.com, as well as the bloomforwomen.com. And I'm going to find a site for Addo Recovery for those that are in Utah. And if any of you out there that are listening have questions, feel free to email me at annette@annettetalks.com. And if they want to get a hold of you, Rebecca?
Should I give my email address?
It's up to you if you want, or the Thrive Relational Recovery.
You could find me on the website, or my direct email is Rebecca@Thrive Relational Recovery. Phone number is 303-886-6092. I'm pulling
Great.
Steve. I'm giving my phone number.
And you can find that on the bathroom wall too.
Thank you. Again, this podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Thank you for listening to LDS Unmarried Life, where LDS singles gather.
I'm gonna bloom where I'm planted. I won't take things for granted. Come what may, bring it on. I'm gonna love it.